Coming up, after the Brooklyn Nets sent the third overall pick to Houston in the upcoming draft, we take a look at how this offseason could get even worse. What if Phoenix realizes that the timeline on Kevin Durant has run out? We break down a potential disaster scenario. All coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And Doug, don't allow the cheerful nature of the intro to throw you off. We're talking about how things could look even more bleak for the Brooklyn Nets in the short term as we take an overview of where Phoenix stands and their potential offseason decisions.
Yeah, look, being a Nets fan, having that a part of that is a little Schadenfreude of wanting to, just like misery loves company, I suppose. And that's just kind of the way it sometimes goes with this team. But we have a clear one-to-one. Well, we have a clear look at like sort of what happens when a superstar trade goes all the way wrong, right? That
Sure.
Here in Brooklyn, it's like it goes all the way wrong, and not contending with the original James Harden trade, but looking at like sort of the after effect, and the after effect is shipping a number 3 pick to Houston, which thank goodness is a bad draft. Because otherwise we'd really be at death's doorstep. But then it kind of forces you to look at where the Nets did this to another team, i.e. the Phoenix Suns, and looking at how the worlds at which this could play out over in Phoenix that would benefit or not benefit the Nets going forward. And I think this summer is going to be instructive in looking at how Phoenix views their situation and how the Nets could stand to like sort of like what the Nets should be rooting for in this situation. Like besides just the Phoenix demise, how the Phoenix demise could play out, I think is important to sort of understand as a thought process.
Yeah, 100%. And we've been hearing basically the general sentiment coming out of Phoenix is not that Kevin Durant's a bad guy. And we already had some discussions on here about how his legacy kind of looks a little less shiny than it did once upon a time as he continues to make the circuit around the NBA. But generally speaking, it's that, yeah, I'm down to show up. I'm down to play basketball. And I prefer if I didn't have to do anything else. So it doesn't make him a bad guy, but it also disenfranchises an organization from thinking, let's stay recommitted to what this version of the team looks like with Kevin Durant, with Booker. Feels a secondary component to whatever's going on in Phoenix, at least in my mind. But the bottom line being, if you now look at it and you've dumped all of these assets into getting Kevin Durant there, the Western Conference is stacked. You don't know if this team is going to be first round playoff again next year and an exit, if they're not going to suffer injuries maybe that are going to affect you, and you don't have the ability to make a lot of different decisions. So all of a sudden, if you're being proactive, you would say that Phoenix should certainly be looking at a 36-year-old Kevin Durant and saying, maybe now, if we pull the plug and we get as much as we can for him in this moment, we actually can save our 26, 27, and 2028 seasons that otherwise are probably going to look pretty bleak for this organization.
Yeah, and there's a world too where Kevin Durant asks out too. I mean, like he's already reports as sort of like him being maybe a little unhappy. I mean, watch, rinse, repeat with this. And you said he wasn't a bad guy, and I believe that's probably the case. Is he a great teammate at this point? I mean, there's ways to argue that he's not, right? Or is he good for your franchise in terms of like building it all around him? I don't know. I mean, he's a great player, so it's nothing around that. But
you can't not talk to your coach for a month, as it's been reported, and be a good teammate or good for the overall production of an organization. Even if your talent on the court is amazing, like there has to be a line there somewhere around that, right?
Of course. And so regardless of whatever the machinations that end up happening here in Phoenix, like what we're looking at here from a Nets perspective is a situation where it can go out a couple of different ways, right? So the dream of the Nets so far has kind of been, or like a Nets fandom also, has been these 27 and 29 picks, these 2027, 2029 first round picks, because the thought process here is that this is the time where the Phoenix Suns thing will have gone, the wheels have fallen completely off, and they will be in a situation with this, like, death repeater tax where you just can't do anything. It locks you up for infinity. You can't make your team better. You can't trade guys. You can't draft anybody. You can't sign mid-level. You can't do anything, literally, like in the way the new CBA works. So the Nets fans, and I think Nets front office too, has looked at this situation and said to themselves, well, these are the ones that are going to be frankly, our Nets picks, right? Like, because one thing that kind of gets forgotten is that oftentimes, we talked about this yesterday, oftentimes these big superstar trades that involve lots of first round picks, the first round picks end up being kind of like not that good because those teams stay good for a while. And they just, they keep the superstar. They kind of stay okay. They don't win the championship, but they make the playoffs. And you don't convey these super awesome top lottery picks like the Nets have somehow. But like,
it's just too comical. You're right. Like, it doesn't always go that way. It's a 22nd overall pick that Phoenix has this year. Like, we think they're so bad, it's all gone wrong. It's still a back end first round pick. Unless you're the Brooklyn Nets, then you do the
Nets just somehow find a way to, they find a way to ship off like the number 1 overall pick or the number 4 overall pick or the number 3 overall pick. I mean, they do this. It's like unbelievable. No one else really does it. So
Sean Marks should have a TED talk about this.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So, but I think that's the idea. It's like, hey, if we can hold on, these 27 and 29 picks will just really be the jewels. But if the Suns were to start, kind of rounding back to the beginning here, if the Suns were to start rebuilding now around like Booker's timeline, let's say, all of a sudden, like, there's a chance those 27 and 29 picks aren't amazing. Like, everyone's assuming they're going to be amazing. There's lots of scenarios where they are not amazing, where they're just okay or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And I think trading Durant now, and there's a good reason. There's lots of many reasons to not do it.
There we go.
Trading Durant now, I think the Nets fans would have to look at this and be like, ugh, that's not amazing. That's not great, because that means they're resetting it now. And 4 years from now, or 3 years from now, those picks could just be middle of the pack and not these crushing assets.
No, 100%. And coming up here in a second, it's so diminishing what the Nets currently have, future assets down the road in the draft from the Phoenix Suns. And you mentioned Booker in there. We'll go a little layer deeper on how they can turn it around pretty quickly here and be competitive in the West. Already a playoff team, by the way. The other side of it is, what does it mean to have the picks of Phoenix be devalued when it comes to negotiating on the market, whether it's trading away players currently on your roster, trying to regather your own assets, which the Nets don't seem terribly interested in. It all points in the direction of the Brooklyn Nets potentially kind of being in the wind when it comes to the next 3 to 4 seasons. We'll continue to flesh out this part of the conversation coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA, NHL as well. FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers are getting $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You win that $5 bet, you're going to get $150. The bet on spreads, money lines, player props, so much more. Looking ahead to tonight's games here, Pacers, Knicks. Pacers plus 2.5 against the Knicks. I know no one wants to do it because it's going into MSG. Knicks, they're so injured, folks. I'm going to go Pacers plus 2.5 with that $5 bet. Don't mind that one at all. It's always hard to make that button click, but let me tell you something. The Knicks, I think what we saw last game could be a little bit of what we're looking for going forward. Just some of what you're going to grab over on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, NBA playoffs well into the throes of the second round, advancing towards Eastern and Western Conference finals. It's all so exciting. Brooklyn Nets, not so much. And before we talk about how on the open market or how on the trade market, the Nets could really get pigeonholed here if Phoenix chooses to pull the plug, in the very short term, in the 2025, not this draft, but in the next draft class, that Phoenix pick, that's the first part of this process coming in the trade for Kevin Durant, even that one already, I think, as you've been talking about, Doug, needs to be viewed through a different prism than, we have Phoenix's pick in 2025. That's not as valuable at the moment.
Yeah, and so if they were to like reset it this year and run the risk of being bad going to 2025, I mean, that would be another scenario. Like that would be a scenario too, where it'd be like, okay, short term, it actually might get better. And then the 27 and 29 picks would be worse because the 2025 draft with Cooper Flagg, Ace Bailey, like there's some other guys here, Dylan Harper, like there's guys that you would get really, really excited about if the Suns were to bottom out.
Yeah.
I still think trading Durant and still having Booker and Bradley Beal for whatever he is, like it's still hard to imagine them being horrible. Like getting something back for Durant and having a couple guys, maybe the roster gets a little bit more rounded out. New coach and Coach Bud, which you know is going to. I mean, there's lots of reasons why this is not going to happen. By the way, because they probably didn't bring in Budenholzer to like tank or whatever,
Right.
and so I don't think it's likely. But I don't think it's off the table either. And if they bottomed out, if they were really bad this year, that would be a real risk for them to convey a 2025 pick, which could look really, really good comparatively to this draft. So I just want to make mention of like there's multiple avenues where I think it kind of all ends up working out for the Nets no matter what, but just working out in slightly different ways. Again, though, worst case scenario is they're just okay all the way now through 2029. Like that's the problem. Not just being great. But for the Nets thing, they don't have to be great. They just have to be terrible. And I'm a little worried that like they aren't going to be awful. That's the biggest problem.
And that's, again, the contrast here is the Nets send out all of their picks. Okay, it was a lottery. It ends up spiking to the third overall pick. What is the Nets team going to look like next year, right? So you're still going to do in 2025, to your point. Okay, Phoenix was okay. They made the playoffs, but they got bounced in the first round again. Okay, 20th-ish pick, something in that range, going to be what you're talking about. Okay, now it's going to be a good draft class, and the Nets are going to be able to do something with that, but you're still going to look at it through the, right, but our pick is over here, and that pick is turning into X, and we feel like we're missing out on another opportunity. And that's probably what this Houston spiking to 3 triggered for a lot of Nets fans is, right. Yeah. What if it doesn't go the best way? What if it doesn't even go a pretty good way? What if it kind of goes the worst way over the next few seasons? It's going to constantly be looking at the better pick that you don't have and also seeing the picks that you do have not come to fruition in the way that you hope. It is funny, though, you mentioned, like, if Phoenix did reset it and it was just Booker, like maybe they do try to dump Beal as well. Seems impossible with that contract.
That's impossible. I think that's
like,
the no trade.
They can attach 2 future second round picks because that's what they have in the coffers right now. But if they looked at it in any way of resetting it around Booker, I wonder how bad, quote unquote, the Phoenix Suns would be in the Western Conference. Is probably the other saving grace here. The likelihood of those picks staying a little more valuable because they're in the West. If this was an Eastern Conference team, honestly, even if they had finished the way they did, getting bounced in the first round, they'd probably say, yeah, we'll just run this back. Why? Because Kevin Durant and Booker, you'll sort this out. You can end up right in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics next season. But it does look a little bit more bleak when you look at the landscape of the West. And it doesn't seem like Phoenix is going to go this direction, but they should be taking into account that the short-term future in the Western Conference is an absolute gauntlet to try to get through, even if you're a good team. We've seen really good teams not advance in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and if you look at the landscape of the Western Conference, it's like this again where I can tell a nice story for the Nets because there's lots of ways, no matter what the Suns do, that it goes wrong because there's more teams probably on the rise than on the fall. Now, no, it's never that everyone's on the rise, but if you look at the Western Conference landscape, let's assume most things pretty much stay the same, right? Like Thunder are going to stay good, Nuggets are going to stay good, Timberwolves are going to stay good, right? Like, so you already know those 3 teams, and those teams could probably suffer some injuries and still be okay, right? And so like those teams are going to be fine. You have to assume the Mavericks are still going to be really good. Lakers, they're at least probably still going to try around LeBron. I'm assuming he resigns. Pelicans are going to rebuild around Zion. It's hard to imagine they're terrible, right? Kings are pretty much have their team in place. I think the Warriors probably are set to go down here a little bit. I think the Clippers are definitely set to go down. Rockets up. Jazz, hard to know. Grizzlies for sure aren't going to be worse than they were this year. Spurs, you have to feel like are going to get better as just like Wemby gets better. And then the Blazers stink. But like, I think that if you look at that situation, there are still worlds where even in best case scenarios for Phoenix, who barely made the playoffs this year, right? I mean, like they not barely, I guess they were the 6th seed, but that was with sort of like amazing health from Durant, right?
Yeah.
Like they got a ton of minutes in games out of Durant. And it's hard to project that going forward. So I think even if they were to stand pat, I think there's more ways for the Suns to drop than there are for them to rise in the standings. And maybe that's good enough for the Nets. So it's like the best scenario is play out this year and it still kind of goes bad, even with Durant for the Suns. And then he like asks out, or they can't make any moves and they're locked in place. I don't know. I know I kind of long-winded that piece, but I think that there are many worlds where it's still kind of fine for Durant to stay here. Does that make sense? Because I think you make a good point that the Western Conference is such a gauntlet compared to the East.
Well, I think one of the things would be for Phoenix to look at is, well, we're going to go into next season with Coach Bud and with Kevin Durant and Booker and Beal, and this is the team, and we're running it back. We got the better coach, and we think it's going to go better. Well, it doesn't look like it's going so well getting towards the deadline, right? Or maybe, we never wishing for injuries, but if one of those three players gets hurt, now, if it's Kevin Durant, obviously it throws everything completely out the window. But if one of those players gets hurt and it looks like you're falling in the very competitive Western Conference, then it does make it easier to make a different decision. You mentioned, listen, would Kevin Durant again ask for another trade from another franchise? It doesn't seem like he has an issue with doing that. So Booker suffers an injury, and the month ahead of the trade deadline, the Phoenix Suns start to slip and they don't have depth on their roster because they have no ability to sign anybody and they don't have any draft picks. Can I see Kevin Durant saying, hey, I'm 37 years old. You can get me someplace competitive. I think that very much would be a scenario. So holding out if you're Phoenix can be viable and just see how the landscape shakes out, right? See how these other teams are unfolding, see how your team looks under Coach Bud. But it still comes back to two things. One, does Kevin Durant want to be a part of any team? Really, does he want to be a part of what it is to be on this team? Or is there only certain scenarios where he feels like he's 100% bought in? And I'm not even really knocking him, but was the version with Kyrie Irving, I really liked doing that because Kyrie Irving's the guy in the front of the camera and I get to kind of do my thing. Does that still offer the same value when you're in a slightly smaller market in Phoenix? Would he prefer to go to team X or Y where he has players that he knows and is friends with off the court, right? Like, it does kind of come down to the buy-in now at this point with Kevin Durant. And at a certain age point, as great as he is, I do think that the rose gets a little bit gilded there, and you go, yeah, maybe you're not worth having on this team with everything that comes along with it. And it's very easy to paint that picture if you exit out of the first round like Phoenix did this past year, if you don't quite get back on point going into next season as well, right? Like, you don't have to squint too hard and see it where it goes from Kevin Durant, elite, one of the best 5 players in the league, to maybe he's top 10 or 12, and he's not quite worth the frustration or the off-court things that come along with that a little bit. So coming up here in a second, though, Doug, how about this scenario? Phoenix, you want your picks back? You want control. Everybody wants control of their own assets. Hey, slide me Devin Booker across the table. Oh, we get into a trade scenario right now. No, we're not bringing Kevin Durant back. Stop it, Doug. We'll get into it in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at PrizePicks. Look, this is the best time to get in on the action over at PrizePicks, where you can win up to 100 times your money, take on the world's best players, the game that levels up during basketball's postseason. All you're doing on PrizePicks is you're going more or less on the PrizePicks projections. Like I said, you can win up to 100x your money. As few as 4 correct picks, that's turned $10 into $1,000. All you're doing, like I said, is you're going more or less on the projections that PrizePicks puts out there: points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals for the NBA. Got MLB, Ks, and home runs, hits, all that good stuff. If you're looking over at PrizePicks for tonight's games, a couple that I like going more on the Nikola Jokic 50.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. I think they're just going to turn it all the way over to him here against the Timberwolves. Conversely, I kind of said it before with the Knicks, I don't mind less 43.5 points, rebounds, assists for Jalen Brunson, who just doesn't look right. And I think the gas might be all the way out of the tank here for the Knicks. Just some of what you can grab over at our friends on PrizePicks. All you're going to do for PrizePicks, you're going to download the app today. You're going to use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You're going to get a first deposit match up to $100. Download the PrizePicks app. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA. First deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
All right, so as we wrap up the Locked On Nets episode today, I wanted to throw out, although Doug got me caught off guard. If you're watching on YouTube, I could see by the glint in his eye and the grin on his mouth there that he wanted to talk about the potential of, would you bring Kevin Durant back?
I just thought that's what you were going to say. That seemed more realistic. That seemed neither seemed realistic, and for some reason that seemed more realistic
than Devin Booker.
Than Booker. I think that's going to be. I think Booker Well, go ahead with Booker. I think Booker would need to probably like ask all the way out, and I think that there would be just a massive bidding war. So I don't see him doing that, like at least for this year yet. I think he's the guy that's been there, not Durant, and so
yes.
I think it's Durant out the door first. I mean, real quick, if Durant asked out, I mean, there's no way, right? There's no way Brooklyn does round 2 with him.
Well,
right?
here, okay, let's talk about it on the
All right,
high
I know you
level
wanted to do Booker, but I gotta
No,
put
I
out
know.
the KD
This
thing
is
first.
good, though. From an NBA level, let's talk about from the NBA level before we get net specific. What is Kevin Durant's value? Like, how many first round picks are you giving up for Kevin Durant now at his age, with everything we know? How many first round picks would you attach to get Kevin Durant onto your roster, Brooklyn or otherwise?
Oh, that's so hard. I mean, the Nets, if I was the Nets, I wouldn't do it, right? Because I just think, and it's not actually even about Durant so much. It's just like he's just all the way off their age timeline, I think. And so whatever timeline that is, and I think it's just they don't have the requisite pieces around to like make a championship contender. So if I'm the Nets, I was sort of tongue in cheek here. I wouldn't do it, but it's less about Durant and more about, well, it is about Durant, but it's less about the reasons you would think. It's more of like he's just older and they just don't have a roster set up to sort of maximize what he is now.
Right.
If he was like, I don't know, like what's the team? I mean, he could fit in on a lot of teams still. I mean, if he was like the Magic, right, or someone like that, it's like, I don't know.
A realistic team that like needs exactly who and what he is. But what are you willing to go for him? You just saw the Nets got an absolute haul for him, but it feels like we're so far removed from a team saying, "Oh yeah, we would give up the world to get Kevin Durant on our team."
Yeah, I mean, he's still clearly really valuable. And I know sometimes like during these times of year, we want to just put all these guys out the pasture and just say no one would ever want them. I'm guilty of it sometimes too. It's like a little too front of mind. You saw them lose. You think they stink. They don't. I mean, he's still really, really good and a really, really valuable player. It's hard for me to answer like what the overall value is. I will say if he asked out, there would be teams that would definitely talk themselves into it for sure. For like not the same package that went out from Brooklyn, not like 2 young players and a boatload of unprotected picks, but they would give up something, and then their own fan base could have its own existential crisis around what it means to like bring them in or talk themselves into it or think it's going to be good. But I do want to just pause, and because I know there's people out there that are like, oh, he would go for pennies on a dollar. I don't think that would be the case. He's still so good, and the game will still age gracefully, even if he's maybe a tougher guy to sort of like bring in and have it be all rah around him. He's still amazing, and the game will age gracefully enough with like how he's able to score. So I think there would be teams that would do it. I wonder if the Suns like secretly just hope he does it. I wonder if there's a part there too.
Well, remember, it's like even going back to like, it's like the Brooklyn Nets, obviously, hey, listen, like we want to keep Kevin Durant. We want to have a star, all those things. Remember, Durant made the first request the first time, and Sean Marks said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep moving forward. And then you go through the season, he says, okay, now I do want out. You've traded Kyrie, and they say, okay, we're going to do it. But that, you always bring this up when we talk about, it was like Nicholas Claxton this offseason. He's a big part of our future. He's exactly the kind of guy that we want on this team. We hope that we resign him. And I said, hey, like that sounds like it's going the direction, and maybe it will. But as you point out, yeah, well, there's no harm in saying that you want him to be a part of the team and you hope that it works out. And then if he signs somewhere else, you go, oh, well, we wanted him to be, but it was too big of an offer. We couldn't match it. Same thing with Kevin Durant. Well, okay, he doesn't like Vogel. We're bringing in a new coach. We want Kevin Durant to be happy. We want Booker. We want this to work out. We believe that this team can win a championship. All right, well, and then Kevin Durant asked out, and what can we do? We're not gonna hold him hostage. So we went and looked at the landscape and took our best offer. So I think
and by the way, it's such a bullet dodge because Durant's done it before, so you wouldn't even take any bullets from it. Because
now at this point,
Durant's already walked away from the Warriors, asked out of the Nets, and had left OKC, right? Like he's every stop along the way, he's been the unhappy party. So having him be unhappy again wouldn't be like, this is the difference between him and Booker asking out. Durant asking out is kind of par for his course. Booker would be, oh man, we really fumbled it. We had a star. He was going to be, could have been a Sun for life.
Yeah.
And we screwed it up so bad that that he wanted out. There's two totally different things. This is actually why I'm like I said that I wonder if secretly they just wouldn't mind. It would be bad, but they might not mind if it was just like on Durant. Like, hey, what do you want us to do? We tried to bring in a generational talent. The guy never was happy. We thought he could make him happy. We were wrong. He's never happy. And like our hands were tied. That I think is a little better.
Of course.
And I do wonder, like, if you truth serum them up, if they just be like, man, I wouldn't mind being out of the Kevin Durant business where we can still get a little something back.
And again, that's not, and the Nets kind of got themselves into that scenario, right? They looked like they weren't willing to pay Kyrie without caveats in the contract. They knew it might cost them Kevin Durant, but Kevin Durant comes and asks for it, and the fan base still says, you blew this, you messed it up, you should have done everything to keep him, all those things. But in the end, you do get to step back and say, listen, it didn't work out for us. We didn't say we're ready to trade these guys. They came to us and said they wanted out. So it's the, minor caveat, though it may be, of being able to kind of say, of course we want to have the stars, but sometimes it doesn't go the way that you hope. I do find it interesting. And I think that just on the Kevin Durant piece, him getting to a place, this sounds so weird to say, but it's like you want him to be on you want to put him on a team now, not where he's find a team where he's the third best option, but where it's the third highest level of responsibility game to game, where he gets to come in, be an elite talent that he still is, and just kind of do his thing. But when he's kind of checked out, when he doesn't want to be doing the heavy lift, you have a Booker. It's like you need someone else, not Beal, right? Phoenix needs someone other than Beal to be the third guy on that team. I wonder if those scenarios present themselves around the league. It makes for a very interesting discussion at a minimum.
Yeah. Beal was the mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Kevin Durant
wasn't the mistake. Beal was the mistake. And that was the part. I mean, that's the, if we're ever going to look back, I'll get out of here, but if we're ever going to look back at the mistake the Suns made that really might have cemented the Nets into like a win-win situation here with these picks, it was Beal, not Durant.
Yeah.
It was like just bringing him in and a totally untradeable contract as he ages poorly, probably like that is going to end up being probably the saving grace.
Also, I mean, one last note here that goes through Kevin Durant's contract, 25-26, making $54 million, a little more north of $54 million. So obviously something to keep an eye on. And because I like it, I want people to get into the comments and get involved. Doug, I can get Kevin Durant and Devin Booker onto this roster for Cameron Johnson, Dennis Schroeder, Nick Claxton on a re-signed contract, Dorian Finney-Smith, Ben Simmons, and all of our picks. I think we pulled the trigger.
Think about it. I'll think about it. I'll think about it. I don't know. We'll think about it. We'll see.
I'm going to think about it. You know what it is?
Think about it.
I'd like to keep Ben if I could. If I could keep Simmons, I think I'd feel better about it.
I mean, a little flexibility wouldn't be bad, Yeah. Okay, we're going to get out of here. Much appreciated everyone that stuck with us. Huge response to yesterday's YouTube video about the number 3 pick. Misery loves company when it comes to giving away huge assets in the draft. So really appreciate. Hope to keep the good times rolling. We'll roll through the postseason and beyond, talking Brooklyn Nets basketball. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe over on YouTube as well.
When things go wrong, you'll find they usually go on getting worse for some time. But when things once start going right, they often go on getting better and better. Why that is C.S. Lewis.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. Narnia. I just mentioned Narnia.
I think it was Cecil Simon, right? Cecil Simon Lewis, I think is the full name.
I don't know, dude. Just watch the movies. You don't need to read the books. Okay, we're going to get out of here. One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Basketball. Yeah.